Hi there, my name's Carolyn Parry, and I'm an award-winning career coach, TEDx speaker, and author of both Change Your Story and newly published Supporting Achievers to Unlock Sustainable Career Success. Now, there's a reason why I wrote this book. My mother taught me to achieve and brought out that side of my nature, I think, so she could really compensate for never having really been successful in her own right. And I learned something from my father too. I learned how to overwork because that's how he became a really successful self-made man, having had to leave school at 14 when his father died. What neither of them taught me was how to find happiness, meaning, and how to thrive, both in work and life. And that's what Supporting Achievers is designed to do, to enable professionals, achievers, all of those people who strive for more to be the very best they can be in a way that's sustainable and without burning out. So if someone were to ask me how to help achievers to unlock their full potential in a way that is sustainable, I'd say that there are really three essential elements to consider. One is to develop true mastery in listening beneath the surface so that you can hear the thieves in action. So, for instance, in chapter 1 of my book, I tell the story about Geraldine, who at one point said to me, I got 99%, with a face of real horror. And what she was really doing there was showing me the thief of perfectionism in action. And we need to hear and acknowledge that thief, because that's really important. And once we do that, we can open the door to explore with our client those underlying fears and beliefs and work at that level rather than simply at the surface or presenting issue level of that individual comment. So the second one, after you've developed that mastery, is to understand the progression patterns that show the vulnerabilities of achievers. The 7 career thieves that I write about in the book don't always work in isolation. In fact, typically with a lot of achievers, they are a sequence. They start with perfectionism, they move to comparison, approval seeking, overwhelm, right the way through then to burnout. And if you can help an individual client understand those patterns, those thieves in action, you can actually stop them being a threat by employing some guardians to prevent the inevitable or potentially inevitable progression to burnout if you don't do that. I think the third coaching essential is to combine and share theory and compassion with your clients. If clients can understand the theory of something, that can normalize their experience a little bit and make it feel less, it must be me and I'm a failure, which is a typical default for achievers. Everywhere I've found, including myself. So achievers need to understand the neuroscience behind their behavior, what the source of their drive is. And that's often largely to do with the neuroscience piece around brains being wired in achievement loops. So the more we achieve, the more we get the dopamine hit and the more we are encouraged to achieve again. And once an achiever can understand that, we can give them permission to be human, to have moments that aren't perfect. And if we do that, that really gives them a better strategy for growth and success, because otherwise they're operating from a position of a fixed mindset rather than a growth mindset. And we all know that learning is our best way to grow. So when we combine that evidence-based information, the theory, the neuroscience, and we do that in a way that is compassionate with that client so they can be compassionate with themselves, that's their best chance of growing into the people they really are and want to be. Now, I'd love to hear what your comments are to what I've said so far. So do drop a comment in the chat and I will gladly respond. Let's get a conversation going around this. So I've already mentioned about the 7 career thieves, and you're probably wondering what they are. So I describe them as being the hidden habits and beliefs that steal an individual's potential, happiness, and sustainable success in career and life. Because when you're an achiever in one place, you're an achiever everywhere, typically. So I wanted to share the first 3 thieves with you. And the first one is one we've already talked about, which is perfectionism. And I define that as the pursuit of impossible standards. It's not actually about excellence, but actually what it's truly about for an achiever is that feeling of never really being good enough, no matter how much they achieve. I mentioned Geraldine's story a minute ago, that she scored 99% in her exams and she had a face of horror when she told me. And when I asked her what was wrong with 99%, she said, my father asked me what happened to the missing 1%. And you could see that land on her. The second thief that follows on from perfectionism, somebody who's trying and striving for impossible standards, is they are comparing continually to see how they're measuring up. So comparison is the trap of measuring up. Now, this is about clients constantly judging their progress against other people, and it's really quite toxic because it can certainly fuel significant insecurity. And the more a client compares against others, the more that comparison erodes the very confidence and the self-belief that they need to succeed. So we've had a bit of perfectionism, we've moved on to comparison, and now comes the third thief, approval seeking. And that's about acting to please others. That's about building careers on others' expectations, whether that's family or peers or friends or society, rather than on true, authentic values that an individual may have. I recognise that one in particular. I did that very successfully for 17 years in sales and marketing until I changed career at the tender age of 39 to become a career coach because I couldn't deal with the inauthenticity anymore. When achievers build their futures inauthentically based on others' expectations, they are usually left unfulfilled but successful. That's dangerous. And if you add in the other four thieves, inevitably that sequence will lead them to a path where the thieves collude to take them to burnout. You can hear more about the other four, you'll learn more about the other four thieves in the book itself. So I quite often get asked, what are the three common mistakes that coaches, HR professionals, and educators can make when they're working with achievers? And I think there are three that I'm going to share. One is about assuming that achievers can take care of themselves, and actually to assume that they should be able to. And that's absolutely not the case very often. Achievers may look successful from the outside, and that means that people go, they don't need help. So the resources get directed elsewhere. But achievers are particularly vulnerable because of their very drive and nature to be stellar. If you think about high-performing athletes for a minute, they have coaches that help them all the time to be elite. Yet when it comes to all sorts of other types of achievers, unless they're working in big companies that have talent development programs, they just get neglected. People assume they can sort themselves out, so achievers get left on the wayside, and it's what I call a form of benign neglect. They can sort themselves out, we don't need to worry. But absolutely we do, and I'm going to talk about why in a minute. So the second mistake, apart from assuming that they can sort themselves out, is to treat perfectionism as a strength to leverage. It is a strength, obviously, but when a client says, I have high standards, and our normal reaction is to nod approvingly, they're not talking about high standards. They are using high standards as coded speak for perfectionism, and usually impossible standards. Now, those impossible standards are the very things that steal an individual's joy and well-being and actually block their growth and their development because they're so afraid of failing. And yet we know that failure leads to learning, and it's learning that provides the growth that they need. And I think the third mistake that we can all fall into as coaches and supporters of achievers is not focusing enough on what's underlying the presenting issues. So we need to keep that ability to spot underlying patterns. If a client says, I'm overwhelmed, like Charlie did, one of my clients, and that's in chapter 4, The Thief of Overwhelm, usually what we respond with is some time management tools. That's a presenting issue fix. But the thief of overwhelm is rarely just about time. It's a surface issue. It's a learned behavioural response. And actually, it's the fourth stage of the 7 that start with perfectionism and end up in burnout. And what it misses is the systemic pattern that's underneath that we need to work at and help them to change, because otherwise it costs them their future, their health, and their career. And that's what supporting achievers digs into. And I hope that you'll find it's a way to enhance the work you do with your most capable clients so they can be the brighter stars that you know they're able to be. So what is the hidden cost to us if we lose the talent that achievers have? Well, actually, it really matters. I want to share some statistics with you just to illustrate that. The scale of the problem is huge and largely avoidable. And it costs us talent, innovation, leadership, and productivity. Although we don't measure that loss, it is evident in the statistics that we can go and explore. So, for instance, if you look at the UK sickness rate and statistics for 2024, they reached their highest ever at just short of 149 million sick days. That's huge. Again, in the UK, the cost in terms of mental health to employers and poor mental health is estimated to be around 42 to 45 billion pounds every year. That's lost benefit that could be used to generate jobs, to invest in changes in society and a whole raft of other things as well. If we scale from UK to global, research by Gallup shows that if the workplace has staff who are fully engaged, so they're stars rather than what I describe as sleepwalkers or saboteurs at work, that productivity boost would increase by 7.5 trillion pounds. Now, I can't even imagine that sum, but it's huge. Achievers do form the stars that drive success. If we fail to look after them, we're failing to look after all of us. And what's worse really than the statistics, because data's great, but how it impacts people is much more important, I think, really. The personal cost when we lose achievers and when we don't look after them is their loss of confidence. So they can't innovate, they can't create, they can't bring in new approaches that really make a difference. Their identities become fractured. They get strained in their relationships, both at work and at home. And very often, not looking after an achiever will lead to a grievance and an untimely and unhelpful departure from an organisation. And they also cause really prolonged recovery journeys. So, for instance, Anwen's story in chapter 7, it doesn't tell you in the book what's happened next because she's still going through that burnout process and recovery. And that's taking time. That will take a year, maybe two, and she's only partway through that. That's the impact of not looking after achievers. And not looking after achievers starts really early, and the neglect that they suffer and the impact on them is already measured and seen. So research shows that 1 in 5 gifted pupils in the UK actually fail to meet their potential in schools and universities. They drop out. They get lower standard degrees, so they don't get the opportunities that they've worked for and merit in terms of ability. And that's even set them back before they really start their career in the workplace. So it's for all of these reasons that the Seven Career Thieves framework matters, I think. And it's full of tools that will help you to intervene early before those patterns become entrenched. So the more that we can support achievers, the better it is for all of us. For us as individuals, if we are achievers ourselves, for us as coaches, HR practitioners, for organisations, for society at large, we all need to stop the erosion of talent by spotting how we're losing it early on. So one of the things that happens to achievers is they fall into something I call the achievement trap. Now, you might be wondering what that is, and I define that as being the relentless pursuit of success, which ironically undermines the very happiness that they're seeking to achieve through it. So how does that happen? Well, when somebody achieves something really significant, maybe it's a promotion or an award or recognition of some sort, they get that brief moment of satisfaction, that fleeting happiness. It's hedonistic, but it's not lasting. It's not fulfilling. It's not purposeful. And that hedonistic hit is very quickly followed by a question, which is, so what's next? The goalposts shift, standards become raised, they feel accomplished, but it's not sufficient. They're accomplished in a moment, but not in a way that is genuine, heartfelt, and sustainable. And that's what creates the achievement trap. I think there are three elements to that trap. The first is to do with a client's conditional self-worth. Their value is tied entirely to achievement, not to who they are intrinsically, but to what they can do. If we remove the doing, if we remove the achievement, their sense of self very often can collapse and implode. I think the second element is the hedonistic treadmill. It's that next success provides temporary relief, but we need to reset because I need to climb a bigger mountain. I need to do better because I get that hit of validation, but that's not sustainable. And that is caused by the third element, where there's such a massive misalignment between what somebody's doing and actually who they're being. So that gap between self and authentic values and enacting inauthentically in values that don't sit, that misalignment. Clients are focused on achieving what they think they should be doing. There's lots we should on ourselves continually. And that should comes from convention, from expectations, from others, from society, from what looks impressive on LinkedIn. But that, in their heart of hearts as achievers, and I speak as one, is not what's genuinely meaningful. And that causes somebody to suppress their genuine identity, and that masking has a massive cost, and it's exhausting. And it leads to a world that starts to collapse. People who are heading for burnout, the signs are probably there a year, 15, 18 months beforehand, before it actually happens. So if we can actually put support in early enough and actually teach people how not to go down this path at all by understanding the thieves and how the guardians can prevent against that, and what we need to help them to recognize in themselves and change, then actually that can change individual lives, families, societies, businesses. The change can be significant. So I just want to finish with just a little comment about, if this sounds familiar, if anything I have said has resonated with you, then Supporting Achievers has got the frameworks and tools to help you as a career coach, as an HR professional, as an educator, as a policy maker, to help achievers be the best they can be authentically in a way that's sustainable, so we can do all of this differently.